Hello out there, internet friends. The Rings of Power just dropped their first 3 episodes a couple days ago, and me and Tim thought it was important to jump on here and talk to you guys about it. And what if I told you that, despite all of the vitriol you hear on the internet and YouTube today, that maybe the Rings of Power is better than you think, and we'll tell you why. I watched it. I watched the first season. I did I brought visual aids again, and see.
My visual aids are newer than your visual aids.
Well, see, there's a reason. See, I wanted everybody because we're gonna not talk horribly about the show. So there's a reason these are all dog-eared and the spines are all white and stuff like that. Because one, I'm old, and two, these books are old. These are the ones I read when I was in high school. So when everybody says that we're not Lord of the Rings fans, we don't like Lord of the Rings, we've read them. We read the books. We liked the books. I read the books before the movies were even out because I'm a little older than Tim. I'm a genuine Gen X person, according to all of the. Tim just thinks he is.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dan brings up a good point. We've read the books. We've seen the movies. I own all the extended edition movies on digital. I've seen them dozens of times. I've read the books at least twice each time, some as many as 5 or 6. We are able to be versed in this. Now, I want to actually go out there and probably put a little disclaimer at, just because we are Lord of the Rings enjoyers does not mean we are Lord of the Rings fanatics. Okay.
We're not scholars.
So, Dan and I do not speak Elvish. Okay. I do not own a Hobbit costume, and neither does Dan. So
no,
we definitely enjoy Lord of the Rings. And
I mean,
we watch it and enjoy it. So I want that out there that yes, there are
close to I did spend close to 20 hours in the movie theater just a few weeks ago with my, wife and 2 grown children rewatching the extended editions of Peter Jackson's movies. But yeah,
we are versed enough, I think, to have an opinion to say that we enjoyed this. Now, look, we're not going to tell you that the series was perfect, and there's a lot of things that we're going to get into. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that Dan and I will give you a more positive opinion than you're going to read online, and definitely more positive than our opinions have been on anything Disney recently. So, so Dan, let's go ahead. What are your initial reactions to the first 3 episodes?
Well, I did want to say, have you read that one? Have you read the Silmarillion, Tim? See, I think this is where a lot of the fandom is up in arms. I tried to read the Silmarillion. I did. I own it. But I made it about that far. This is actually a bookmark from where I worked at Delphi, putting wear sensors on brake pads. I love Tolkien. I love these books. The Silmarillion reads like a fictional history textbook. Mm-hmm. And I know about history textbooks because I'm a social science education major. I've read a lot of history textbooks. Mm-hmm. They're not fun to read. No. So I don't have and you know what? I know that this series is not based on that book because they don't have the rights to that book, and therefore it diverges from what that book says. And I've also heard that it diverges from, it's based on the appendices of the Lord of the Rings. Another true confession. I've read the books multiple times. I have never read a page of the appendices. I have never read the appendix of a textbook, and I did graduate. I got my degree, but I mean, yeah. I love that Tolkien put in the work to make sure his world building made sense and that he had a whole history and he knew the whole history so as not to contradict it. And I really do appreciate that there are people out there that have become scholars, like literal scholars, not just like internet scholars like Star Wars, but literal university scholars mm-hmm. about that history, that fictional history. But not knowing that, I'm not getting angered when they contradict it, I guess. So, no, I'm watching the show. It has the same limitations that any prequel movie or series has. Mm-hmm. In the limited stakes, the limited drama, in that, if you see somebody's name that you recognize, you know exactly where they're going to end up later. Even if you see people that you don't recognize, if they're highly prominent, you kind of get the idea that things are not going to work out well for them because you didn't see, either you know them because you've seen them already, and things are going to be fine for them, or you say, hey man, they're in this a lot and they weren't around later, so you make some conclusions there too. So there's always limited drama in a prequel, but I've watched all of the first season. I'm 3 episodes deep into this season. Watched it with my wife. My kids have watched it, the first season, and we all love the Peter Jackson movies. I think I'm the only one who's taken the time that's actually read the books. No, my daughter read the books, and I don't know. We're entertained. You know what I'm saying? The production value is far better than anything we're getting from Disney. I know they're spending a lot of money, but maybe Elon gets to Mars before Jeff. I mean, that doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm not a shareholder at Amazon. Maybe if I bought a big stake in Amazon, I'd be upset about the money they're spending. But other than that,
I think the main reason that a lot of people get kind of upset by the budget is simply this. Okay, if you don't have a growing budget that peaks at that maximum number, then basically what happens is you get some of these series that have ended very, very, very quickly because the network or the streaming service whoever didn't have the money to just keep up with the story. That's basically what I think a lot of people's concern is. Is Amazon really going to take a $500 million bath and be okay because because they're the ones pushing Lord of the Rings? I just don't know if that's a feasible thing. And that's kind of where I think a lot of people are. The rumors are, of course, now this show had a high budget to begin with. It started season 1 with $465 million budget. Okay. And then the budget ballooned as the production went on to $700 billion. And in order to keep it under that $700 billion budget, they had a separate production cost budget. And when you add all that together, the rumors are that it went above and beyond $1 billion. So are they really going to keep doing it? And then the revenue brought in from the streaming is said to have been somewhere in the neighborhood of around 40% of that. So are they really going to take a $500 million bath to keep this show going? I just don't know. I mean, they have the money to do it. It's just whether or not they want to keep throwing money down that rat hole. And if they do that, this is the biggest problem that people have is this continuity is going to be just completely ended right here. And I think one of the biggest problems is, yes, we see the money. Compared to Disney, we see the money, right? We visually, it's very stunning. All right. They're
That's
on location.
impressive.
They're on location. They clearly are paying great writers. The dialogue is very good. It matches Tolkien very.
The lighting is good. It doesn't look like they're on a sound. If they are
on a stage, it doesn't look like you're on a stage. Yeah, that you can actually see the money here. The problem is, do you see $500 million more than the Acolyte? I don't know if I see $500 million. I see more money for sure, but I don't know if I see $500 million. And that's kind of the thing I think some people are wondering is like, if at its absolute peak, I mean, at its financial peak, when all of the cast were A-list stars and household names, and the momentum of the show was huge, Game of Thrones was at like $15 million an episode, right? This is $87.5 million an episode. Okay. I want everyone to think about that. That's pretty crazy. So, are we really seeing a vastly superior quality to what we saw in Game of Thrones? I don't know, and that's kind of the question.
I mean, are we talking Battle of the Bastards, Game of Thrones, or are we talking about the battle with the Night Walkers that got fought in the dark and nobody could see?
That one. Yeah, that one. That's when, and once again, it's because the cast was all household names at that time. Again, I mean, at its absolute peak, we're at $15 million an episode for the financial peak, not the peak of the series. But that's kind of where I think a lot of people are going to kind of pull back on this a little bit, because how long is this going to last? If I get invested in this, how long is it going to last? And if I and should I get invested in it anyway? Is kind of what a lot of people are wondering. So so that's kind of where it's at now. my take on the first 3 episodes is that they were not bad. Okay. Episode 3 definitely threw a couple curveballs. The way I explained it to Dan earlier is, I think in that meme with the 2 dragons and the goofy dragon, episode 3 was the goofy dragon. Okay. But the way I see it is, overall, the story is not terrible yet. Okay. Now there are still things in there that I did not care for. I did not care for the fact that they're trying to make us sympathetic toward the orcs. I don't like that at all. Okay. By throwing the orc families and the orc baby and all that's a ridiculous thing. I don't like that. I do like that they didn't try to make Sauron more sympathetic when they went back in time. I thought that's what they were going to do. I'm not going to lie. I thought they were going to try to make Sauron more sympathetic. And they didn't do that. They made him a jerk. They made him a jerk then too, and so that's that's kind of something to be.
We just had a good discussion about the sympathetic villain on our Punisher debate, and I think we established a lot of good things there. And I did, because it's so popular. Do we really need a sympathetic Sauron? And really, what they did, which I enjoyed, is they made him even more evil. They made him worse, because you're sitting here thinking like, okay, is he having some second thoughts? Is he going to, because that old man tells him you can always choose right. And he even tells him again on the ship before it gets attacked. And you're thinking like, is he actually questioning being evil? Is he thinking about being good? And then whether or not either he was playing these people the whole time, or he did have a second thought and was thinking about being good and totally abandoned that at the first thing. And either way, that makes him like even more awful. And I do like that, despite the fact that he is evil and not redeemable and not sympathetic, doesn't make him uncharismatic.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? A villain doesn't have to be sympathetic. He doesn't have to have good motivations to be charismatic, to be desirable. You know what I'm saying? To and he could be persuasive while still being evil. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are still going to be upset. Okay, and here's the main. First of all, I think that season 1 had the least surprising reveals when they revealed him as Sauron. That's I think everybody kind of was thinking to themselves like, oh, he kind of conveniently met Galadriel, and I'll bet that guy's Sauron. And that's kind of one of those moments that I think everybody was just like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? And then when he was revealed as Sauron, I think a lot of people always viewed Sauron as the faceless villain. You never really saw him except for that very, very, very small glimpse at the beginning of Lord of the Rings where he was all armored. You never really saw him. And so to put a face, and quite frankly, at the beginning of episode 1 in season 2 here, we're talking, they put a baby face on him. Okay. I mean, they really tried to make him look Prince-esque. And that is something that a lot of people probably are going to take issue with, just because Sauron was always just faceless evil. And so I understand that that's something that some people will get a little upset about. I don't think it really ruins the story, though, because he's not even quite what he is by the time we get to Fellowship of the Ring. He's not quite that yet. And that's kind of why I think him not being faceless right now, it's kind of like when we have Anakin Skywalker turning into Darth Vader. When he puts the mask on and becomes more faceless, he almost becomes a different character. And so it doesn't really ruin it for me. But I do see why some people would say that is something that they're not.
Yeah, but I mean, it's fairly clear that he wasn't always a disembodied eye, on the top of a mountain. Everything has to start somewhere. As a disembodied eye on the top of a mountain, I don't know how you rally armies to try to conquer Middle Earth. You know what I'm saying? Everything has to start somewhere. And
1000%.
It's well established that somehow Sauron was involved in creating rings of power that a contingent of elves, dwarves, and men willingly accepted and wanted to have, without maybe truly realizing, oh, he's going to make one more that's going to turn them all, that makes him rule them all. But I don't think a disembodied eye, a big red disembodied eye on the top of a mountain is going to persuade the men, the elves, and the dwarves to take his rings and think that they're good, you know? One thing I didn't like, I always hate plots that are contingent upon really bad, almost unbelievable communication.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it doesn't ruin it for me, but it did bug me that Galadriel figures out he's Sauron.
Yeah.
And just says, "Hey, don't ever talk to him again."
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't say why. Just rides off.
And I love how like in depth and one step ahead Elrond is as well. I think that is one of those things that is kind of a hidden gem in the whole thing, is that Elrond is the guy who really sees how cunning Sauron is from the beginning with the rings of power, and that this is all part of a plan, part of a trap that you're all falling into, and you just don't get it. So I actually really love what they have done with Elrond's character, and I feel like it sets up very well for where Elrond ends up. Okay, right. Where he's the one who essentially tells Isildur to destroy the ring, and he's the one who comes up with the idea for the Fellowship that the ring needs to be destroyed. All of these things kind of it's a very good setup. Now, I think a lot of people will say that the guy that they picked for Elrond is just not a very good representation if we really want this to be a prequel of Hugo Weaving. That's just kind of what that's the way that I see it. No, it's not a great representation. I think the elves in general are just not great representations of elves. That's a personal opinion. I think that what Peter Jackson did in his casting and what he did in makeup and what he did in everything initially is far superior to what they've done in this show and how the elves are represented. I think Galadriel looks good. I do think Elrond looks good, even though he doesn't look like Hugo Weaving. I do think he looks like an elf. But I think a lot of the other elves, I'm just not seeing it. And that's kind of one of my things that I don't like about it.
I do. A lot of people do get hung up on, like, when you're casting prequels and sequels and things like that, physical resemblance, or if you're doing a biopic, you got to look like the person. But then a lot of times, if you're
didn't look anything like Ian McKellen, so I mean, we can make some passes here and there.
If you get too hung up on making people look similar, you might end up with like a carbon copy looks wise, but a horrible performance.
That's right.
So I'm willing to grant a whole lot of leeway as far as physical resemblance. Yeah, I mean, the elves don't all have the elvish quality like they did, and like all of the actors that he cast had a similar kind of look that you could say is elvish. The nose, the kind of facial structure was very similar in the Peter Jackson movies.
Liv Tyler, Cate Blanchett. I mean, they all had that quality, and to their credit, like I said, Galadriel, I think, has that. I do.
Right.
A lot of them do not.
The one thing is we're getting a lot more elves that look older.
Yeah.
And now, again, I'm going to confess, I didn't read the Silmarillion all the way through. The elves are I mean, do they just live a really long time, or are they totally immortal? I think they're totally immortal, right?
That's what I thought was totally immortal. I mean, that's the way it was. That's the way I always understood it. And so for me to get to that point where I have to kind of understand how the elves. So I was thinking the same thing as you, Dan. It's like that the old elf with the facial hair, like. Really? Okay. That was one of those I was wondering about.
In fiction, when you have an immortal character, usually, I mean, once you have an immortal, like, it's usually established most immortal characters are babies, right? They're not born fully grown, but as an immortal, at a certain point, they have to stop aging. Mm-hmm. They have to stop. So in most fiction, when you have an immortal, they stop aging somewhere in the 30s or 40s, and they look to be around 30 or 40 for all of eternity. So, what the Celebrimbor looks a little old. The one with the forge, the one who's actually forged, he looks a little old for an immortal.
I know there are exceptions. Okay, I know there are exceptions. Remember that Arwen chose immortal life. We all remember that. I mean, so there are exceptions in this universe for that, but this would seem like an awful lot of exceptions. I don't know. It seems to me like almost a completely different elf universe. It's all, and maybe it's explained through being a different elf race or something like that. I don't know. But but once again, I'm not hip on the lore, so you guys in the comments will have to help us out. But I don't think that that's anything that
it doesn't hang me up. Yeah, I mean, like, Elrod goes to visit the oldest and wisest elf out there that was going to throw the rings, and he ends up getting one of the rings. And that guy, I mean, yes, he looks old, and he looks old to be an immortal, but it is established he is the oldest and wisest of the elves. It is weird when you're talking about immortals like vampires or other immortal creatures, and like they're going to the wise one, and it looks just as young as everybody else.
Yeah.
So visually, it helps establish when you actually cast somebody who is older, just for the rest of us to have that visual cue.
And remember when Hugo Weaving, when he played Elrond in The Lord of the Rings, said, "I was there." How many years ago did he say? "I was there however many years ago." And then he looks exactly the same. So,
it's just like
400 years or something stupid. And he's just like, and he looks exactly the same. And that's cool, if that's the explanation for it. But I think that's where a lot of people are going to go with it. They're like, I thought the elves really didn't age past a certain point, So anyway, but so that's part of it.
And I know a lot of people are down on Gandalf and like, oh, it's so obvious. But like, does it have to be a huge surprise and a big twist, or can it just be fun that we know and he doesn't?
I that's kind of where I'm at with it. You know what I mean? I guess I kind of I kind of have always looked at that as kind of a side story that I'm not really interested in. If you want me to be like, I'm like, when that's on screen is when I'm actually like flipping through my phone and looking stuff up from the previous scene and all that kind of stuff. Because a lot of it is just kind of filler. It's walking. He does something magic and he causes some catastrophe and maybe they get attacked or followed. And that's a lot of the stuff where I have not been paying a lot of attention to the detail.
I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of, it's like, the what are the little people? I don't know. They're not hobbits. They're one of the races of.
They refer to them as halflings. So I'm wondering if they are hobbits or if halfling is its own thing. I don't know. So they did refer to them as halflings. So I was wondering about.
There's 3 or 4 races of small people on Middle Earth.
Yeah.
There's precursors to hobbits. There's like the hobbits, the halflings, the Harfoots.
Yeah.
Or nothing. I don't know. There's different ones. Again, we should have read those appendices, Tim, and we would know all the different ones. But they're all related, and they're kind of fun because it's comic relief a little bit. The hobbits, even in the Lord of the Rings, are kind of fun comic relief characters in many ways, like Merry and Pippin, even Sam in certain points. So that's fun. Yeah. So, and it doesn't bother me that like, oh, they don't know who Gandalf is. And like, I'm not sitting here like, oh, they're so stupid. We all know this. And it's like, yeah, we all know it, but it's still fun watching them find out.
Yeah. And to be completely honest, like like I said, I'll care when it actually has an impact on the real story, when we're talking about Sauron and when we're talking about Galadriel and the elves and, all that. When it starts having an impact on that is when I'll actually care about it a little bit more. Right now, I'm just kind of like, it's not. It's the one thing I will say, and the one thing that I think that a lot of people will agree with: the episodes are very, very long, and so when I get any kind of a respite in the midst of that to like get up and go get a snack, that's what I do. Okay. Those were the scenes I went and got a popsicle last night, is when they were doing when they were just walking through the desert. So that's the kind of stuff I think.
Yeah. That's what we were talking about. How are they going to recoup this investment? Right. Yeah, and exactly. I don't know. Are you giving Amazon the extra $2 or whatever it is to go ad free?
No, I'm not.
I'm not either. And to tell you the truth, I mean, if they're trying to make up this investment by introducing ads to Prime Video, there are like almost no ads. Like I'm sitting here like maybe I gotta run
hour and 20 long. Like it wasn't like that with The Acolyte. The Acolyte had like 4 commercials in a 30-minute episode. Okay. And each commercial was like 4 minutes long. Okay.
Yeah.
So it added like 20 minutes of ad time. It's not like that here. You get like one commercial. So it's maybe a minute and a half at the most. And it's like in an hour and a half episode, there's maybe 2 of them. Something like that.
I mean, they make you watch. Sometimes they make you watch 2 at the top. Yeah. Who cares at the top?
Honestly, I think that they're not going to recoup that investment that way. I mean, they have to hope this turns into Game of Thrones, or there's not going to be a season 3. There's no reason to be a season 3.
I could go for more commercial breaks because, like, again, I'm like, since I'm not paying to not have the commercials, I'm trying to wait for the commercials to take a bathroom break. And I'm like, there are no commercials.
Yeah.
I don't want to pause because the thing is, and we've all done it on the various streaming things where we have to deal with commercials. You pause it, you run to the bathroom, you come back, you unpause it, and now you got to sit through a commercial because you didn't time it right, And I don't want to do that, but man, they're not selling many commercials. Either that or they just really want to keep it down. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't get it, and I don't get how they're, like I said, the worst thing about this series is that they didn't start smaller budget and work their way up to it as the popularity grew. I think they wanted to try to make it popular because it had a big budget, and that's kind of working in reverse. It's cart before horse, and now they have to have it be successful. It has to be huge, or they're just not going to be able to keep doing it. And I just don't know. I think they have a finite number of seasons anyway, and they know, hey, if we get to 4 seasons is where it's going to lead up to, and boom, and then we know what the total investment is going to be, and we're willing to take that bath. Maybe that's where they're at with it, but I just don't see how any company could look at this and say, we're going to just keep taking this bath on this because we want to keep putting the content out. I just don't think that makes any sense. So. Yeah. At some point they're going to have to change it, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this will be a vastly popular series by the end of the season. I don't know, but as of right now, it doesn't appear it's going to be that way.
I don't understand how the metrics that companies like Amazon or Apple use to declare this stuff successful, because it's such a sideline for them. It's not what drives their profitability. So how they measure it being successful or not, I mean. I don't know. I mean, I have enjoyed it. You're watching this on YouTube. You and probably everybody else you see didn't. So I don't know what metric they could, other than me and Tim liked it. I don't know how they could declare it a success, and make some more.
I think what they got to look at is they got to look at viewership. They got to look at the ad revenue that comes from the viewership. And they've got to, I'm sure there's some kind of algorithmic equation that shows them, we accounted for this much money by this many views. And I don't know how they do it. I'm sure that our friends Bone Bridger and John Automates have some kind of a system in place to determine how much money they make based on viewership. But right now, I'm just thinking to myself that that's probably the biggest hang up on this show right now, is people are wondering how long it's going to last and if it's even worth getting invested in. That's really it.
Because here's I'm not new to Tolkien or Star Wars or any of this nerd stuff. What I am new to is YouTube reactions to it. We've been on other people's shows and doing this for around a year. Before that, I'm not big on spoilers. I don't like to be spoiled, so I don't like trying to look up what's going to happen and all of that. And I hadn't really watched a lot of reviews. So I do know that people hate this show, right? I've been on YouTube long enough to know that. I know that. I don't know why, because again, I've only been on here for, a little over a year, and I didn't watch all that when it was happening. So I don't know the exact reasons why everybody hates it. We tried to find somebody to come on here and explain to us why it's awful.
I think I mean, I think a lot of people are upset by some of the stuff that we mentioned, that they're kind of trying to make some of the stuff sympathetic towards maybe the orcs. And originally maybe they were thinking, oh, well, being able to see Sauron's face is not great because we're used to seeing him as this faceless evil. And I think that a lot of people just don't like when you mess with the lore that they've had in their mind for years and give them something, I don't know, you didn't know the real story. This is the real story. People don't like that. People like having this idea in their mind and letting them kind of build their own fantasy to the world that they were introduced to. And that's why I think prequels are generally not a good way to continue a series. Generally, okay. If you want to continue a series, you should go on to sequels. And so I think, you mentioned before, there's a standard bookend that you have when you have the prequels, and people are going to be naturally inclined to say, I don't like that because of X, Y, and Z, versus when you introduce sequels, you might not like where it goes, but that's where it goes. Okay. Yeah. Whether or not you like it, that's where it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
The idea that something could be changed in a prequel basically means, oh, you were wrong all along. You thought this was like this, but this wasn't like this. And that's kind of why I think a lot of people kind of just are more inclined to hate prequels anyway. But I understand a lot of that. And I understand a lot of people wondering where all the money went, because there's no way that we're looking at a $700 million project. There's no way. Okay. Yeah. What actor here is worth $20 million? None. I could not name you a single one of their names. I have no idea who these people are. Okay.
No, I don't.
So for me to say that one of these actors is worth $20 million, or two or three of them are worth $20 million, nope. Sorry, not seeing it. And that's where I think a lot of people are looking at this. It's just like, why did we spend all this money? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if it's because of time, because you had to have so many hours of film in order to get to this hour-and-a-half episode, I get that. But those are the things I think most people are going to be upset about. And then on top of that, I'm sure that the details, I'm not hip on the details, but I'm sure that the little details of the things that people know about Lord of the Rings are driving them crazy right now.
Because I can't imagine runtime and pacing is a huge problem for Tolkien fans, because pacing is not fast in the books. No. It's faster in the Peter Jackson films, but those films are not fast-paced films. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I always thought to myself, whenever anybody asked me about if they should read Tolkien, I said, here, this is my honest assessment. Okay. If you can read about a tree for 4 pages and hear what the tree is called and what has happened at that tree and the monument that was once built at that tree and why the tree earned the nickname, and if you can read that and feel good at 4 pages later about reading all the history of that tree, then Tolkien is good for you. If you think that sounds boring, then you're going to be bored to tears reading Tolkien. You will not enjoy it. Now, it will be very imaginatively described for the people who can tolerate it. But that's the one thing when you're watching something, a lot of that stuff is stuff that can be abbreviated. I think that's kind of the thing. And so, yes, the pacing is slow, and yes, Tolkien typically has slow pacing. It could be faster. That's the one thing I think the each episode that we just saw could have been done in 45 minutes if they wanted to. You know what I mean? And got every point across that they wanted to.
Yeah. But in today's A, with Tolkien, and B, it just seems like the trend now for everything to be long. Yeah. Unless you're the acolyte, and then everything is,
This is long. I think the biggest thing is that there's just no hook. Okay. There's just no hook episode to episode. And I think that's one of the reasons that people are not going to like it as much.
It's not ending on cliffhangers, which is like a big streaming thing. You're supposed to end on a cliffhanger.
That's supposed to be the thing, is you got to bring them back for next week, because you got to make it binge worthy. You got to make them want to go ahead and watch the next episode if they're not watching it when it drops.
That's one thing that might lose people. Like sometimes you feel like you needed to take more notes, or you're not going to understand what just happened.
There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and honestly, like because it's such a long series, I don't feel bad missing the details. I think on the aggregate, you can kind of get the gist of where they're going by watching it. Even by osmosis, if you're just in the room watching it, you'll pick up the general tone of what's going on. And I think that's kind of what they're going for, because Lord of the Rings is so in depth with a lot of details. You can't possibly catch them all. You can't.
Yeah. Well, unless you want to be one of those scholars.
Exactly. I'm sure there are people that are. I'm not one.
Yeah. Literally, PhDs in this. Does Galadriel bother you? That is one thing I've seen in a lot of headlines and thumbnails.
She doesn't bother me.
Everybody
she's got a pure motivation. She's got a pure motivation. Her brother, and she definitely comes across. I think her acting is fantastic. I think that she's done a very good job. A lot of people don't like her. I think a lot of people just don't like her because there are other people that they want to see centric in the story. But yeah, for the most part, I enjoy her for the most part. I thought season 1, she did a good job, and I thought that she did a pretty good job here as well so far.
I did too. A lot of people, I've heard complaints about her being too good and too powerful and too capable. And you know what? I'm a child of the 80s. You're a child of the 80s, so the later 80s than me. But, I love Indiana Jones. I love Han Solo. I love John McClane. I love heroes that are over their head and struggling. But, I also love Rambo, and one of my favorite heroes, one of my favorite characters in all media is Batman.
Sure.
So where am I going to get off saying like this character is too hyper competent? I mean,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I like hyper competent. I like, there's room in the world for variety. I like heroes that are over their head and making up as they're going along and struggling. But I also like ones that are just like always one step ahead and are hyper competent. I like Reacher. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like that's another Amazon.
Galadriel's case, I think what we really like is the fact that she is so zealous about her cause that it gets in the way of logic sometimes, and she makes mistakes because of it. And that's one of the things that I actually like about Galadriel, that some people are like, oh, how could she not know he was Sauron? How could she be so blind? How could she? Well, it's because she was so zealous for her cause, she missed what was right in front of her. That's kind of the whole point, and that's something I actually think that she acted very well. So anyway, all right. I mean, all in all, Dan, I think, let's try to wrap this up just because we have been going for a minute. But I think that all in all, I think that the series started very well. Episode 3, like I said, threw me a couple of curveballs, but I'm willing to kind of give it a shot. I don't think it's anything that has completely tanked the series yet. I think they can recuperate from that. I'm interested to see what they do with the little weird orc baby family stuff. But for the most part, I say that this series so far is off to a better start than season 1 was. And I think that most of us can agree that at the very least, we see the money. The dialogue was written very well.
Yes.
And I feel like we have a series that at the very least, I want to see what happens next week now. Okay. Which is different than what I've seen in a lot of other streaming series recently. So that's kind of something that I'm used to, when I grew up on network TV shows. It's just like, you got to wait and see what happens next week. And that's kind of where I'm at now. So I'm real anxious to see what happens next week. And, maybe it'll be a total flop by the end of the season. And I'll just say this thing was garbage. What happened? That's what happened with a couple others. I remember thinking at the beginning of Secret Invasion, hey, man, this wasn't too bad. The first couple episodes, hey, this is pretty good. And then the last episode, I was just like, that was terrible. I don't know what I was thinking. So, So it's at the same time, it's early, but let's see what happens in 5 episodes.
We'll see. Hey, we could, I think it could turn out good. So everybody, that's me and Tim's take on Rings of Power and where it's going and where it's been. We're optimistic. We feel like so far we've been entertained.
Don't forget to tell us what you think in the comments. Watch the rest of our videos. Have a good day.